The real reason cities are so crowded. Half of humanity is squeezed into just 1% of Earth's land. While the world looks vast on a map, 3.8 billion people are crammed into a circle smaller than the United States. This concentration follows a pattern that has persisted for over 1,000 years. A 5,000-mile circle in Asia that serves as a hidden blueprint for civilization. Ancient river systems and fertile agricultural zones have drawn people to these regions for millennia, creating population centers that endure today. Meanwhile, vast territories across the globe remain nearly empty. In this video, we'll examine the powerful geographic, environmental, and historical forces that explain why humans continue to cluster in specific regions while leaving others sparsely inhabited. The Asian population circle revealed. If you were to take a satellite image of Earth at night and look at the glowing lights that represent human activity, you'd notice something extraordinary. The lights aren't evenly distributed. Instead, they're heavily concentrated in one relatively small region. This remarkable pattern reveals one of humanity's most fascinating geographic puzzles. Picture drawing a circle on a world map, a circle just 5,000 miles in diameter. Within this modest area that spans across parts of China, India, Japan, and Southeast Asia lives over half of our entire species. More than 3.8 billion people call this region home, despite it representing only a small fraction of Earth's total land area. This phenomenon has been the reality of human population distribution for centuries. What makes this intriguing is that humans have developed technologies to survive in the most challenging environments, from the frozen Arctic to scorching deserts. Yet we've chosen, collectively and consistently, to concentrate ourselves within this specific Asian circle. This becomes strikingly apparent when examining nighttime satellite imagery. The Asian population circle glows intensely on these night maps, with dense networks of light spreading across eastern China, Japan, and the Korean peninsula. The Indo-Gangetic Plain appears as a luminous ribbon stretching across northern India, while coastal regions of Southeast Asia shine like delicate beaded necklaces along shorelines. Compare this to Australia, where Perth, Sydney, and Melbourne appear as isolated bright dots along coastlines, with the vast interior remaining in darkness. Or look at North America, where lights cluster along the eastern seaboard and Great Lakes, but thin dramatically across the Great Plains and Rocky Mountains. This pattern's historical persistence is remarkable. A millennium ago, in 1000 CE, Marco Polo hadn't yet traveled to Asia, but population records already showed this same concentration. China's Song Dynasty census counted approximately 59 million people, while India had around 75 million inhabitants. Even then, these regions contained Earth's greatest concentration of human beings, suggesting the geographic advantages of these areas have influenced settlement patterns for over 1,000 years. To understand this distribution, we must consider carrying capacity. The maximum population size an environment can sustain indefinitely based on available resources like food, water, and habitat. This concept explains why some regions support dense human populations, while others remain sparsely inhabited. Carrying capacity varies dramatically across geographic regions, influenced by climate conditions, access to fresh water, soil fertility, topography, and natural resource availability. Areas with fertile soil, reliable water access, and favorable climate generally support much higher population densities than regions with extreme temperatures, limited water, or poor soil quality. The population density contrast between regions is extreme. In eastern China and the Ganges River Basin, densities regularly exceed 1,000 people per square kilometer. Meanwhile, vast areas of Central Australia, northern Canada, and the Sahara Desert maintain densities below 1 person per square kilometer. The Indo-Gangetic Plain exemplifies high carrying capacity, with rich alluvial soil continuously replenished by river systems, abundant monsoon rainfall, and moderate temperatures enabling agricultural production that supports large populations. Compare this to the Australian outback, where water scarcity and nutrient-poor soils severely limit agricultural potential and human population density. What's remarkable about the Asian population circle is that it encompasses multiple regions with unusually high carrying capacities. The great river valleys of China, the fertile plains of India, and the productive rice-growing regions of Southeast Asia all exist within this circle. These areas have supported dense populations through agricultural systems that efficiently convert available resources into food production. The satellite lights illuminate the culmination of thousands of years of human settlement decisions responding to these geographic advantages. They reveal where Earth's surface has been most hospitable to our species over time. This pattern stability raises fascinating questions. In an age of global transportation and technology that theoretically allows humans to live almost anywhere, why does this concentration persist? What specific factors make this circle so uniquely habitable compared to the rest of Earth? The answer lies in a complex interplay of natural advantages. The Asian population circle benefits from a remarkable convergence of multiple favorable conditions that together create an environment exceptionally conducive to supporting large numbers of people. It's about having several crucial advantages simultaneously. The combination of major river systems providing water, transportation, and fertile soil. Climate patterns delivering reliable rainfall. Temperature ranges allowing year-round agriculture. And coastal access facilitating trade has created a geographic sweet spot unmatched elsewhere on Earth. These advantages aren't evenly distributed within the circle. The highest population densities cluster around specific features, river valleys, coastal plains, and fertile basins, where favorable conditions are most concentrated. Even within this circle, mountainous regions, deserts, and areas with less favorable conditions remain relatively sparsely populated. This population pattern has endured across vastly different technological eras. From ancient agricultural societies to modern industrial economies, the fundamental geographic advantages of this region have consistently supported larger human populations than elsewhere. While technology has increased the overall carrying capacity of various regions, it hasn't eliminated the relative advantages that certain areas possess. The persistence of this distribution suggests something profound about how humans interact with their environment. Despite our technological capabilities, we remain influenced by the fundamental geographic characteristics of the landscapes we inhabit. Our numbers still concentrate where natural conditions most favor human habitation and subsistence. The Asian population circle represents a geographic sweet spot where multiple favorable factors converge to create environments exceptionally conducive to human habitation. Rivers, the lifeblood of civilization. Looking at the distribution of humanity from above, one pattern becomes unmistakably clear. The most densely populated regions of our planet all share a common feature. They follow the paths of major river systems. These ancient waterways have acted as magnets for human settlement, creating a stark contrast between the thriving population centers they support and the relatively empty lands elsewhere. The Indo-Gangetic Plain stands as perhaps the most dramatic example of this phenomenon. This vast stretch of land, fed by three mighty rivers, the Ganges, Indus, and Brahmaputra, supports a population approaching 1 billion people. The scale of human concentration here becomes even more remarkable when compared with Mongolia, a country that despite having twice the land area of the Indo-Gangetic Plain, is home to just 3.4 million people. This disparity represents the profound impact that river systems have on human carrying capacity. From space, the contrast between these regions tells a story with striking visual clarity. Where the Indo-Gangetic Plain appears as a vibrant green ribbon cutting across the landscape, Mongolia presents a predominantly brown, arid expanse. These colors represent fundamentally different environments with vastly different capacities to support human life. Rivers function as the arteries of civilization, pumping the lifeblood of freshwater, nutrients, and commerce through the body of human settlements. What makes these waterways so uniquely capable of supporting human populations at such extraordinary scales? The answer lies in the triple benefit they provide: reliable freshwater, self-renewing fertile soil, and natural transportation networks. Prior to modern infrastructure, Settlements could only grow as large as their water sources could reliably support. Major river systems like the Ganges provided this crucial resource at a scale that allowed for the development of extensive agricultural systems and large population centers. Beyond drinking and irrigation, these rivers create and maintain the very foundation upon which agricultural productivity depends. Each year, the seasonal flooding of these major Asian rivers deposits nutrient-rich sediments across their floodplains. This natural process essentially delivers a fresh layer of fertilizer annually, replenishing soil nutrients that would otherwise be depleted through intensive farming. The Ganges-Brahmaputra Delta, the largest in the world, demonstrates this phenomenon at an impressive scale. Its fertile wetlands support massive human populations while sustaining diverse ecosystems, including healthy populations of Bengal tigers. This annual renewal creates agricultural conditions impossible to maintain in regions without major river systems. The third critical advantage these waterways provide is natural transportation infrastructure. Before railways, highways, or air travel, rivers served as the most efficient means of moving people and goods over long distances. This natural transportation network facilitated trade, cultural exchange, and the spread of ideas, all essential elements for the development of complex societies. Examining historical maps of the earliest large-scale human civilizations across Asia reveals a consistent pattern. From the Harappan civilization along the Indus to the ancient Chinese settlements along the Yellow and Yangtze rivers, humanity's first major population centers formed along these waterways. These represented strategic decisions to settle where the natural environment provided the greatest advantages. The incredible population supporting capacity of these river systems becomes even clearer when we consider their impact. The annual discharge rates of the major Asian rivers deliver water and millions of tons of nutrient-rich sediment that continually rebuilds and enriches the soil. This process creates a self-sustaining system that has supported intensive agriculture for thousands of years. Without these favorable river conditions, regions must rely on more labor-intensive and technologically advanced methods to achieve even modest agricultural productivity. In Mongolia, the absence of major river systems means that despite its vast land area, it cannot naturally support anywhere near the same population density. The harsh, arid conditions of the Mongolian steppe simply cannot match the natural abundance created by major river valleys. This pattern extends beyond just the Indo-Gangetic Plain and Mongolia. Across the Asian population circle, from China's eastern seaboard to Southeast Asia, the presence of major river systems consistently correlates with high population density. The Yangtze, Yellow, Mekong, and other significant waterways all support disproportionately large populations relative to their geographic footprint. Over centuries, these advantages compound. Regions with reliable water, fertile soil, and natural transportation networks could support larger populations, which in turn could develop more complex societies, technologies, and infrastructure. This created a feedback loop where initial geographic advantages translated into civilization-scale benefits that further enhanced the region's ability to support human life. The contrast with sparsely populated regions becomes even more pronounced when we consider how difficult it is to artificially recreate the benefits these river systems provide naturally. Modern Mongolia requires extensive infrastructure, technology, and energy inputs to support even its modest population. Without major rivers delivering water, renewing soil, and providing transportation, human settlement faces much higher barriers to growth and sustainability. What makes this remarkable is that these population patterns have remained relatively stable over thousands of years, despite dramatic technological changes. While modern technology has certainly enabled people to live in previously uninhabitable areas, the broad strokes of human population distribution still follow the patterns established by these ancient waterways. The development of major irrigation projects, modern transportation networks, and fertilizer production has reduced our direct dependence on rivers. But these technologies have not fundamentally altered where most people choose to live. Instead, they've often reinforced existing population centers by making already productive regions even more capable of supporting dense human settlement. This persistence suggests something profound about the relationship between human civilization and geography. The advantages provided by major river systems are so fundamental that even our most advanced technologies haven't rendered them obsolete. Instead, our civilizations have grown up around these waterways, building upon the natural advantages they provide rather than attempting to completely overcome geographic limitations. Understanding this relationship explains why humanity remains so unevenly distributed across our planet. The stark contrast between the billion people thriving along the Indo-Gangetic Plain and the sparse population of Mongolia illuminates a fundamental truth. Where rivers flow, human civilization follows. Agricultural productivity, the rice revolution. While rivers have shaped where populations could thrive, it's what humans cultivated in those fertile floodplains that truly revolutionized our ability to concentrate in specific regions. The Asian population circle owes much of its density to an agricultural innovation that transforms limited land into extraordinarily productive food systems. Rice cultivation stands as perhaps humanity's most efficient food production system. In Southeast Asia, a single hectare of rice paddy can sustain approximately 5 times more people than the same area devoted to wheat in Europe or North America. This remarkable productivity difference explains why regions practicing intensive rice agriculture can maintain population densities that would be impossible elsewhere. This agricultural efficiency creates stark contrasts in how many people different landscapes can support. Consider Australia's outback, a vast territory covering 70% of the continent, yet supporting merely a tenth of Australia's already modest population. The contrast stems directly from the agricultural potential each environment can sustain with available water resources. What makes rice cultivation so extraordinarily efficient? The answer lies in its multidimensional approach to resource utilization. Rice paddies function as complex agricultural ecosystems that maximize productivity from limited space. True microcosms of human ingenuity, where every square inch serves multiple purposes simultaneously. Farmers throughout the Asian population circle have perfected techniques that transform a hectare of land into a multi-layered food production system. In these integrated systems, farmers create symbiotic relationships between rice, fish, vegetables, and fruit trees, all thriving within and around the same paddy. This ecosystem approach multiplies food output while minimizing waste. Perhaps most importantly, many regions within the Asian population circle can harvest multiple rice crops annually from the same plot of land, further multiplying the overall productivity. This integrated approach stands in sharp contrast to agricultural practices in regions like Australia's outback, where harsh environmental conditions limit both what can be grown and how intensively the land can be used. The infertile soils and limited water resources create natural ceilings on agricultural productivity that technology alone cannot overcome. According to the Global Agricultural Productivity Report, the concept of total factor productivity, TFP, helps explain these dramatic differences. TFP measures how efficiently farmers convert inputs like land, labor, and materials into agricultural outputs. The remarkable efficiency of rice cultivation systems represents one of humanity's greatest achievements in maximizing TFP, creating food surpluses that allowed populations to grow far beyond what would otherwise be possible. The GAP report highlights that sustainable agricultural growth requires achieving an average annual 2% TFP growth between now and 2050 to meet global food demands. This benchmark underscores the continuing importance of efficient farming systems like those developed across the Asian population circle, which have historically delivered exceptional productivity from limited resources. These agricultural advantages don't emerge overnight. The high-yield systems prevalent across East and Southeast Asia represent the culmination of thousands of years of agricultural innovation. Farmers throughout the region gradually refined techniques to maximize output from their limited arable land, creating a virtuous cycle where increased food production supported larger populations, who could then contribute more labor to intensify production further. This feedback loop, more food supporting more people who could create even more food, helps explain why population density increased so dramatically in rice-growing regions compared to areas relying on less productive agricultural systems. Historical population growth curves show remarkable correlation with the expansion and refinement of rice cultivation techniques across East and Southeast Asia. What's particularly fascinating about these agricultural systems is how they've maintained their advantage despite technological advances. Even with modern agricultural technologies, the basic productivity advantage of rice cultivation remains. The caloric output per acre for wet rice cultivation dramatically outperforms other farming methods, even when comparing modern versions of each system. This persistent advantage explains why traditional rice-growing regions continue to support exceptionally dense populations despite dramatic changes in other aspects of society. The agricultural foundation, established centuries ago, created population patterns that have persisted into the modern era. South Asia exemplifies this continued agricultural evolution, emerging as a regional leader with an impressive average annual TFP growth rate of 1.4% during the past decade. India in particular has achieved a remarkable 1.7% annual TFP growth by investing in mechanization, information technology innovations, and optimized resource use. This success demonstrates how regions with historically productive agricultural systems can continue enhancing their advantage. The contrast with regions struggling to achieve similar agricultural productivity is stark. Sub-Saharan Africa, for instance, has recorded an average annual TFP growth of just 0.37% over the same period. Agricultural output in these regions relies primarily on land expansion and input intensification rather than efficiency gains, a fundamentally different approach than the intensive productivity model that characterizes the Asian population circle. The Valley of Death concept described in recent agricultural research helps explain why some regions struggle to match the productivity of rice cultivation zones. This concept refers to the gap between innovation and widespread adoption of agricultural technologies and practices. While rice-growing regions have spent centuries refining their agricultural systems, other areas face significant hurdles in adopting productivity-enhancing techniques that could allow them to support larger populations. All these factors combine to create a fundamental geographic reality. The carrying capacity for a human population varies dramatically between regions based on their agricultural potential. The revolutionary productivity of wet rice agriculture allowed Asian regions to support population densities that would be impossible in places like Australia's outback, where climate and soil conditions impose severe limitations on agricultural output. This agricultural foundation underlies the entire pattern of global population distribution we observe today. The concentration of humanity in the Asian population circle reflects the cumulative effect of agricultural systems that systematically produce more food per unit of land than alternatives. The implications extend beyond mere historical interest. As humanity grapples with feeding a growing global population while facing climate change and environmental pressures, understanding these profound differences in agricultural productivity becomes increasingly important. The lessons from rice-growing regions about maximizing output from limited resources may prove valuable far beyond their original geographic context. Current research emphasizes that bridging the gap between agricultural innovation and real-world adoption represents a crucial challenge. Regions that succeed in implementing integrated high-efficiency agricultural systems, similar to those that evolved in rice-growing areas, may be able to support substantially larger populations than they currently do, potentially reshaping global population distribution patterns. The fundamental insight remains clear. Where humans can produce the most food from the least land, populations concentrate. The remarkable productivity of rice cultivation across monsoon Asia created the foundation for unprecedented population density. Climate, shaping settlement patterns that persist. The agricultural miracles of Asia don't emerge from human innovation alone. They're built upon a climate phenomenon, so reliable you could practically set your calendar by it. The Asian monsoon delivers precisely timed rainfall with such consistency that civilizations have organized their entire existence around its predictable patterns, creating an advantage that regions like the Sahara or Central Asia simply cannot match. What makes this climate system extraordinary is its remarkable timing. Across the vast Asian population circle, approximately 80% of annual rainfall arrives exactly when crops need it most, during critical growing seasons. This transforms agricultural potential across millions of square kilometers, functioning as a perfect irrigation system that waters crops precisely when needed. Consider the experience of farmers in India's Punjab region, where generations have planned their rice planting to coincide with the monsoon's arrival in early June. When dark clouds gather on the horizon, entire communities mobilize simultaneously, knowing nature's irrigation is imminent. This shared agricultural rhythm has shaped not just farming practices, but cultural celebrations, architecture, and social structures. This climatic gift stands in stark contrast to places like Central Asia, where farmers face crippling uncertainty about rainfall patterns. In the Taklamakan Desert region of western China, agriculture remains confined to narrow oasis strips because rainfall is both minimal and unpredictable. Similarly, across vast stretches of the Sahara, even modern irrigation technology struggles to overcome the fundamental challenge of extreme rainfall variability and scarcity. The monsoon's reliability stems from a natural mechanism that functions with clockwork precision. During summer months, the Asian landmass heats up faster than the surrounding oceans. This temperature differential creates a powerful low-pressure system over the continent that pulls moisture-laden air from the Indian Ocean inland. As this humid air rises and cools, particularly when it encounters mountain ranges, it releases its moisture as rainfall. The Himalayan range plays a crucial role in this system. These mountains function as a massive atmospheric processing plant, forcing moisture-laden winds upward where they cool, condense, and release their life-giving rainfall across the populated regions below. When ocean currents bring moisture-laden air toward the continent, these mountain systems trigger precipitation that might otherwise never occur, essentially wringing water from the sky through a perfectly positioned natural barrier. This interaction produces remarkably consistent rainfall patterns. While most climate systems worldwide demonstrate significant variability, historical records reveal the Asian monsoon has maintained its general patterns over millennia. Ancient Chinese texts describe agricultural calendars built entirely around the monsoon's predictable arrival and departure. This climatic stability allowed early civilizations throughout the region to develop sophisticated agricultural techniques, knowing that nature would reliably provide water. The stability explains why population patterns established thousands of years ago have persisted into modern times. Early farmers who settled in monsoon-fed regions gained an overwhelming advantage. They could predict with reasonable certainty when rainfall would arrive and plan accordingly. This predictability removed one of the greatest risks in pre-modern agriculture, the uncertainty of water supply. The natural irrigation provided by monsoon rainfall represents an infrastructure benefit that would require massive investment to replicate artificially. Across Central Asia, maintaining even modest agricultural output requires extensive canal systems, reservoir networks, and pumping stations, infrastructure that historically limited population growth and required enormous capital investment. Meanwhile, across monsoon Asia, nature has provided this infrastructure service essentially for free. The monsoon created distinct regional advantages even within the Asian population circle. In regions like the Ganges Basin, the abundant rainfall supports multiple crop cycles annually. Just a few hundred kilometers away in northwestern India, where monsoon effects diminish, population densities historically dropped dramatically until modern irrigation systems were developed. The monsoon's influence appears throughout the cultural and economic systems within its domain. Traditional architecture features steep roofs designed to channel heavy rainfall. Agricultural calendars precisely time planting to coincide with monsoon onset. Even religious festivals often coincide with key monsoon events, celebrations of renewal timed to the life-giving rains. The monsoon creates a natural synchronization of agricultural activities across vast regions. When rainfall arrives with predictable timing, entire farming regions plant and harvest in unison. This synchronized activity facilitated the development of shared agricultural knowledge, seed exchanges, and coordinated labor systems that further amplified productivity advantages. This climate's reliability minimizes the energy expenditure required for agriculture. In regions with unpredictable rainfall, farmers must invest heavily in water storage systems and irrigation networks, all requiring significant energy inputs. The monsoon delivers water directly to fields with minimal human intervention, conserving energy resources that could be directed elsewhere in society. The combination of reliable rainfall, fertile river valleys, and productive agricultural systems created population centers of unprecedented density and stability. Agricultural surpluses supported specialized labor, technological innovation, and complex social structures that further enhanced productivity. This advantage becomes apparent when examining regions beyond the monsoon's reliable reach. The stark population gradient between monsoon-watered eastern China and the arid western regions illustrates how sharply human settlement patterns follow climate boundaries. Modern irrigation technology has somewhat modified this relationship, but hasn't fundamentally altered it. The densest population centers remain concentrated in naturally monsoon-watered regions, with density decreasing as rainfall reliability diminishes. The energy efficiency of farming in these regions creates an economic advantage that continues to shape human settlement patterns. Looking forward, this climate system faces new challenges. Research indicates that climate change may alter rainfall patterns that billions depend upon. The implications for population sustainability throughout the Asian Circle could be profound, particularly because any disruption would affect regions already supporting exceptionally high population densities. This monsoon advantage represents just one element of a complex climate system that has shaped human geography across Asia. The reliable water delivery system created the foundation upon which other geographic advantages could compound, setting the stage for the remarkable population density we observe today. Temperature, the Goldilocks zone. Beyond rainfall patterns, there's a critical environmental parameter that has silently guided human settlement for thousands of years: temperature. The Asian population circle exists within a temperature sweet spot so perfectly calibrated for human flourishing that venturing beyond it historically required exponentially more energy just to survive. While we've examined how water shapes civilization through rivers and monsoons, temperature creates an equally powerful boundary affecting where humans choose to congregate. The vast majority of people within the Asian population circle live in regions where average annual temperatures hover between 15 to 25 degrees Celsius, 59 to 77 degrees Fahrenheit. This range represents the ideal balance for human comfort and agricultural productivity. Warm enough to grow crops year-round in many areas, but cool enough to avoid the debilitating effects of extreme heat. The contrast with Siberia is striking. Despite constituting an enormous 77% of Russia's total land area, larger than the entire United States, this region hosts a mere 27% of Russia's already modest population. The primary culprit? Extreme cold that transforms basic survival into a resource-intensive challenge. In Siberian winters, temperatures routinely plunge to minus 40 degrees Celsius and below, requiring massive energy expenditure simply to maintain livable conditions. This temperature difference creates cascading effects on population distribution. In the moderate climate zones of East and South Asia, humans can thrive with minimal protective infrastructure. Traditional housing throughout much of the region required relatively simple construction using locally available materials. Compare this to Siberia, where surviving winter demands heavily insulated structures, enormous quantities of fuel, specialized clothing, and substantial food stores. All energy diverted from other productive activities. Geographical features help maintain this temperature advantage within the Asian population circle. The massive Himalayan mountain range serves as a thermal barrier, blocking frigid air masses from the north and creating a protective pocket of warmer air across the Indian subcontinent. Without this mountain shield, northern India would experience much colder winter temperatures similar to regions at comparable latitudes. Along the East Asian coastline, warm ocean currents provide another temperature moderating influence. The Kuroshio Current, often called the Black Stream, carries warm tropical water northward along the coasts of Taiwan, China, Korea, and Japan. This maritime influence prevents winter temperatures from reaching the extremes seen in continental interiors at similar latitudes, creating milder conditions conducive to year-round human activity. These geographical temperature controls create one of the most significant advantages for the Asian population circle: extended growing seasons. Across much of this region, agricultural production can continue for 9 to 12 months annually. This extension of productive time allows for multiple harvests, crop rotation, and year-round food production systems that simply aren't possible in colder regions. The northern reaches of Siberia, by comparison, experience growing seasons as brief as 3 to 4 months. This compressed time frame creates an agricultural bottleneck where all planting, growing, and harvesting must occur within an extremely narrow window. One early frost or late spring can devastate an entire year's food production, making agriculture precarious even with modern technology. Historically, this constraint made large-scale settlement virtually impossible without massive external supply chains. Temperature advantages translate directly into energy efficiency, perhaps the most underappreciated factor in historical population distribution. Before fossil fuels, every calorie of energy humans used had to be produced through their own labor or captured from their immediate environment. In moderate temperature regions, people dedicated far less energy to basic thermal regulation. Consider the energy budget of families living in different regions. A Southeast Asian family requires minimal heating, light clothing, simpler shelter, and can grow food year-round. A Siberian family must collect and burn enormous quantities of fuel to prevent freezing, while somehow acquiring enough food to survive months when nothing grows locally. This energy differential represents a massive advantage for settlements within the temperature-moderated Asian population circle. The Asian population circle functions like a natural energy-saving thermostat for human civilization, maintaining ideal conditions that minimize energy expenditure while maximizing agricultural output. By residing within this thermal sweet spot, communities throughout history conserved precious calories that could instead be directed toward cultural development, technological innovation, and population growth. The compounding effect of these temperature advantages becomes even more apparent alongside the previously discussed benefits of river systems and monsoon rainfall. Together, they create a triple advantage: reliable water, predictable rainfall, and moderate temperatures that minimize energy expenditure while maximizing agricultural productivity. In essence, humans throughout history have gravitated toward regions that offer the highest return on energy investment. Areas requiring massive energy inputs to maintain basic survival remained sparsely populated until modern technology and energy sources made them more manageable. Even today, with advanced heating systems, modern agricultural techniques, and global supply chains, the population density gap remains enormous. This perspective helps explain why traditional attempts to populate extreme climate regions often failed without substantial external support. The Soviet Union's efforts to develop Siberia required massive state investment in infrastructure, housing, and energy production, essentially subsidizing the high energy costs that made large-scale settlement economically unfeasible under natural conditions. The temperature advantage is particularly evident when examining historical energy requirements for agriculture. In regions with 9 to 12-month growing seasons, farmers could maintain continuous production cycles, gradually improving soil fertility through intensive management. The shorter growing seasons in northern regions created not just time constraints, but also soil fertility challenges, as the limited biological activity in cold soils slowed nutrient cycling. Temperature also influences human settlement patterns through its impact on disease. The moderate temperatures of the Asian population circle create conditions where humans can develop resistance and adaptations to local disease patterns. Extreme temperature zones often harbor fewer human diseases due to lower biological diversity, but moving between temperature zones historically exposed populations to unfamiliar disease environments, another factor discouraging migration out of the temperature-moderated zones. What's remarkable about this temperature sweet spot is its historical stability. While local climate variations have occurred throughout human history, the general temperature patterns that define the Asian population circle have remained relatively consistent for thousands of years. This stability allowed for the development of agricultural systems, architectural styles, and cultural practices perfectly adapted to local conditions. The temperature moderation within the Asian population circle represents a Goldilocks climate that has nurtured some of humanity's most enduring civilizations. Yet this temperature advantage alone doesn't fully explain why the Asian population circle remains so clearly defined. Natural barriers provide another crucial piece of the puzzle. Natural barriers, mountains and deserts. Those mountain barriers that shape the region's ideal climate conditions aren't just temperature regulators. They're civilization shapers. Throughout history, the same geographic features that created perfect habitats for human populations also effectively trap them within these favorable zones, creating a fascinating paradox of isolation within density. When we examine a topographical map of Asia, a striking pattern emerges. The densely populated regions we've discussed are almost completely encircled by a series of formidable natural barriers. The towering Himalayas to the north of India, the vast Tibetan Plateau, the expansive Gobi Desert stretching across northern China and Mongolia, and various mountain ranges creating natural boundaries throughout the continent. These features form a geographic container, a natural enclosure that has concentrated humanity within specific regions for millennia. This containment effect has profoundly shaped human history across Asia. Consider South Asia, surrounded by Earth's most imposing mountain systems. The Himalayas, Karakoram Ranges, and Hindu Kush have effectively sealed off large portions of the Indian subcontinent from easy access to other regions. This geographical isolation fundamentally shaped distinct civilizations with unique identities. The legendary Silk Road illustrates humanity's extraordinary efforts to overcome these obstacles. Threading its way through some of Earth's most challenging terrain, this complex web of routes linked civilizations that geography had otherwise separated. Buddhist teachings traveled from India to China, paper-making techniques moved westward from China, and countless cultural exchanges occurred despite the formidable barriers. The very existence of the Silk Road underscores how challenging these geographic barriers were. It required extraordinary coordination, investment, and courage to maintain these tenuous connections across such difficult terrain. Nepal and Bhutan exemplify the isolation phenomenon perfectly. Nestled within the Himalayan mountain system, these nations developed unique cultural identities precisely because of their isolation. Their architectural styles, religious practices, artistic traditions, and social structures evolved with limited external influences. The rugged mountain terrain protected these cultures from conquest, while slowing the transfer of technologies and ideas that might have altered their developmental trajectory. This geographic separation created distinct civilizational zones within relatively short distances. Civilizations separated by just a few hundred kilometers of mountainous terrain developed entirely separate languages, writing systems, architectural styles, and cultural practices. The Han Chinese civilization east of the Tibetan Plateau evolved on a completely different trajectory than the Indian civilizations south of the Himalayas, despite their geographic proximity. These barriers affected technological development profoundly. Innovations that could have spread rapidly across flat plains remained contained within their zones of origin. Agricultural techniques optimized for specific conditions remained unknown beyond mountain passes, and engineering solutions might take centuries to reach neighboring civilizations, if ever. Historical migration patterns across Asia almost always followed paths of least resistance around, rather than through these natural barriers. Human movements consistently flowed along coastlines, river valleys, and through occasional mountain passes rather than establishing permanent settlements in harsh barrier regions. These natural funnels created predictable corridors of cultural exchange while leaving vast barrier regions sparsely populated. The influence of these geographic containers becomes clearer when examining population distribution over time. Historical settlement patterns reveal how population growth remained concentrated within favorable regions for thousands of years, with minimal expansion into barrier zones. Even as populations within fertile areas grew to extraordinary densities, the difficulty of migrating beyond natural barriers meant people adapted by intensifying land use within their geographic containers rather than spreading outward. This containment effect created fascinating paradoxes in human geography. Across Asia, densely populated regions exist in close proximity to nearly uninhabited areas, with sharp mountain ranges forming the dividing line. Population density in fertile valleys can be hundreds of times higher than in adjacent mountain regions, creating some of Earth's steepest population gradients. What's remarkable is how persistent these patterns have been. Despite thousands of years of technological advancement, human population distribution across Asia still broadly follows patterns established in antiquity, with the same geographic barriers defining where people live in large numbers. Modern transportation infrastructure has made crossing these barriers easier, but historical settlement patterns remain largely intact. The Mongol Empire illustrates the strength of these geographic containers. As one of history's largest contiguous land empires, it represents a rare example of a civilization that originated in the barrier regions and successfully projected power outward. Yet even this extraordinary imperial achievement didn't fundamentally alter long-term population patterns. Once the Mongol Empire fragmented, population concentrations quickly reverted to their historical patterns. In the modern era, massive infrastructure investments have begun overcoming some natural barriers. The Qinghai-Tibet Railway, completed in 2006, represents one of humanity's most ambitious efforts to conquer geographic isolation, connecting the Tibetan Plateau to China's densely populated eastern regions through extraordinary engineering feats. Similar projects across Asia are gradually eroding the isolating effects of mountains and deserts, yet population imbalances established over millennia persist. By restricting easy outward migration, these geographic barriers amplify the advantages of contained regions. They concentrated human ingenuity and labor within favorable zones, leading to intensified agricultural systems and complex civilizations. The difficulty of leaving these regions meant societies invested deeply in maximizing land productivity rather than expanding horizontally as populations grew. These barriers created distinctly different adaptation strategies within each contained region. East Asia's intensive rice farming systems developed separately from northern India's wheat-based agricultural systems, each evolving to maximize productivity within specific geographic containers. These parallel but distinct developmental paths gave rise to unique cultural solutions for supporting dense populations in bounded spaces. Coastal access, the maritime advantage. Beyond those ancient barriers lies the ultimate connector, the sea. While mountains and deserts divided civilizations for millennia, the vast waters surrounding the Asian population circle are now serving as powerful magnets for human settlement. This shift represents a fascinating reversal in population dynamics. The very edges of land masses have become new centers of concentration. The evidence of this coastal transformation is striking. Within our Asian population circle, 7 of the world's 10 largest ports process 60% of global shipping traffic. These maritime gateways represent a fundamentally different geographic advantage from the historical river valley settlements we've examined. This coastal concentration creates remarkable contrasts even within countries. In China, coastal provinces experience economic growth rates up to 5 times higher than inland counterparts, despite identical government policies and cultural heritage. This disparity demonstrates how powerfully maritime access shapes modern settlement patterns. Visualize this coastal shift. Overlaying population density maps from 1950 with current data reveals a clear migration pattern. While the overall Asian population circle remains stable, density has significantly increased along coastlines, especially in eastern China, Japan, and Southeast Asia. Cities like Shanghai, Hong Kong, Singapore, and Tokyo have transformed from modest ports into global megacities within generations. The coastal advantage is compelling because maritime routes create direct access to global markets. A factory in coastal Guangdong can ship products worldwide with minimal overland transport costs, while a similar facility in inland Sichuan faces significant barriers moving goods internationally. This maritime advantage creates a powerful feedback loop. Initial coastal development attracts investment, which builds infrastructure, attracting more business and workers, necessitating more infrastructure. The economic gravity of coastal regions becomes nearly impossible for inland areas to overcome without massive intervention. Shenzhen exemplifies this transformation dramatically. In 1980, it was a fishing village with barely 30,000 residents, where farmers supplemented their income by catching seafood in the shallow waters of the Pearl River Delta. Today, it stands as a metropolis of over 17 million people and one of the world's most important manufacturing and technology hubs. This extraordinary growth resulted directly from combining coastal access with economic policies that leveraged that maritime advantage. The contrast with Sri Lanka highlights how coastal access alone isn't sufficient. Despite extensive coastline, Sri Lanka maintains a population density approximately 10 times lower than coastal China. The difference stems from integration with international shipping networks and industrial policy. Sri Lanka's ports haven't been embedded in global manufacturing chains to the same degree as their East Asian counterparts. These coastal advantages have accelerated dramatically in recent decades. While river valleys have supported dense populations for millennia, the extreme concentration along coastlines coincides with the container shipping revolution of the late 20th century. Before standardized shipping containers, loading cargo was extremely labor-intensive. The adoption of standard containers dramatically reduced port turnaround times and transportation costs. This technological shift benefited coastal regions within the Asian population circle positioned to capitalize on export-oriented manufacturing. The natural geography of these coastlines plays a crucial role too. The Asian coastline features numerous natural harbors and sheltered bays ideal for port development. These natural features offered protection from harsh weather, creating safe havens for ships long before modern harbor infrastructure existed. Ports like Hong Kong, Singapore, and Tokyo Bay benefit from natural layouts requiring relatively modest modifications for modern shipping. This geographic advantage contrasts with coastlines in other regions, which often feature more exposed shores without natural protection. The difference in harbor availability helps explain why some coastal regions developed more rapidly than others under similar economic conditions. The economic data tells a compelling story. Coastal provinces in China consistently outpace inland regions in growth metrics by multiple times. This disparity creates powerful migration incentives, further concentrating population along coastlines. The result is a fascinating pattern where even within the Asian population circle, we see a secondary concentration effect along maritime boundaries. People cluster increasingly along its edges where land meets sea. This pattern creates interesting policy challenges. China has invested trillions in infrastructure projects connecting inland provinces to coastal ports. The Belt and Road Initiative represents perhaps the most ambitious attempt to overcome coastal regions' natural advantages by creating new land-based transportation networks. Yet despite massive investments, coastal regions' gravitational pull remains powerful. The economic advantages of maritime access are so substantial that even enormous infrastructure spending struggles to fully counterbalance them. Examining economic activities reveals coastal areas typically feature higher concentrations of manufacturing, international services, and higher value industries. Inland regions often focus more on primary production, resource extraction, and industries serving domestic markets. This specialization creates economic interdependencies while reinforcing coastal locations' advantage for globally connected activities. A factory producing electronics for export gains enormous benefits from coastal proximity, while a coal mine faces less disadvantage from inland location. We see this pattern in population movement too. Migration data shows consistent movement from inland provinces toward coastal regions across much of Asia. Young workers particularly move from interior rural areas to coastal urban centers seeking opportunity. This migration has social implications. Coastal cities develop distinct identities shaped by international connections and migrant populations. These coastal cultures frequently embrace change and external influences more readily than inland counterparts. The coastal advantage demonstrates how geography continues to shape human settlement patterns even in our technological era. Despite the internet and modern logistics, proximity to maritime shipping routes still fundamentally influences where people live and work. Looking ahead, this coastal concentration will likely continue, though with new challenges. Climate change and rising sea levels pose particular threats to low-lying coastal areas, including many of the most densely populated regions within the Asian Circle. This vulnerability creates a potential contradiction where the most economically advantageous disaster paradox may face the very geographic features that foster life within the Asian population circle also create deadly vulnerabilities. What we're witnessing is nature's most haunting paradox. The lands best suited for human civilization are simultaneously the world's most efficient killing zones during natural disasters. When earthquakes strike, typhoons make landfall, or floods surge through river valleys, these densely populated regions transform from cradles of civilization into catastrophe zones within hours. The correlation between population density and disaster death tolls reveals a sobering pattern. The more people concentrated in hazard-prone areas, the higher the human cost when nature unleashes its fury. Historical analysis confirms that areas experiencing regular natural disasters maintain growing populations despite the recurring devastation. The communities rebuild, populations expand, and the cycle continues. These populations make a calculated risk-benefit analysis playing out over generations. The agricultural bounty, economic opportunity, and established infrastructure outweigh the periodic destruction in most inhabitants' calculations. Consider the fundamental trade-off. Floodplains nourish crops with nutrient-rich sediment, but periodically drown settlements. Coastal regions provide trading advantages and food security, but face typhoons and tsunamis. Mountain foothills offer moderate climate and water access, but sit near fault lines. These are interconnected aspects of complex geographical systems. The 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami illustrates this vulnerability with devastating clarity. The disaster killed over 230,000 people across multiple countries, with coastal communities in Indonesia, Sri Lanka, India, and Thailand suffering the highest casualties. These same coastal areas had attracted dense settlement precisely because of their maritime advantages and natural resources. The disaster mortality statistics tell a grim story. Despite covering only a small fraction of Earth's land area, the Asian population circle accounts for approximately 70% of all natural disaster deaths globally. This disproportionate vulnerability stems from the lethal combination of hazard exposure and extreme population concentration. When disasters strike sparsely populated regions, the death toll remains relatively low regardless of the event's magnitude. But identical events within the circle can claim thousands or even hundreds of thousands of lives. Communities rebuild in the same vulnerable locations after devastating events because the geographical advantages are too significant to abandon. The rich alluvial soil that makes floodplains ideal for agriculture exists precisely because of the flooding process. Coastal areas providing maritime advantages sit directly in typhoon paths. The fertile volcanic soil supporting dense populations forms around the same geological activity that triggers earthquakes. Modern infrastructure attempts to mitigate these inherent risks through sophisticated engineering. Across Asia, flood control systems channel and contain seasonal deluges. Earthquake-resistant buildings incorporate flexible joints and base isolation to withstand seismic forces. Early warning networks provide precious minutes or hours for evacuation before tsunamis make landfall or typhoons strike coastal communities. However, the effectiveness of these protective measures varies dramatically based on local implementation, maintenance, and community preparedness. Despite technological advances, the fundamental risks remain significant. In many cases, disaster infrastructure merely reduces rather than eliminates the threat, and its protection can create a false sense of security that encourages further development in high-risk zones. Climate change introduces new dimensions to this vulnerability equation. The World Weather Attribution Study found that climate change has already made deadly heat waves across Asia more frequent and extreme, increasing their probability in West Asia by a factor of 5, while making them 1.7 degrees Celsius warmer. In South Asia, these extreme temperature events are now approximately 45 times more likely and 0.85 degrees Celsius hotter than in pre-industrial times. This changing climate reality has immediate human consequences. The demand for air conditioning is accelerating rapidly as populations attempt to adapt to increasingly frequent and intense heat extremes. Yet many communities within the circle lack reliable electricity or economic resources to implement these adaptations, creating new vulnerability patterns based on socioeconomic status rather than just geographic location. The melting of glaciers in the Hindu Kush Himalayas, often called the Asian water towers, represents another climate-driven threat multiplier. These glaciers regulate water flow to major river systems, supporting hundreds of millions of people. Their accelerated melting initially increases flooding risks before, eventually threatening water security across vast regions that have historically enjoyed reliable supplies. Modern early warning systems demonstrate some success in reducing disaster mortality, but property damage and economic disruption continue to increase. This trend reflects both population growth in vulnerable areas and the increasing value of assets at risk. A typhoon striking a sparsely populated coast 50 years ago might have caused minimal economic damage, while the same storm today could devastate cities worth billions of dollars. Often, the poorest communities occupy the most hazardous locations within already vulnerable regions. Informal settlements frequently develop on steep hillsides prone to landslides, in flood zones, or on unstable land near fault lines, places where land is affordable precisely because of the inherent risks. For communities throughout the circle, disaster experience becomes culturally embedded over generations. Local knowledge systems incorporate warning signs, evacuation procedures, and recovery techniques specific to regional threats. These cultural adaptations represent a form of resilience that complements technological solutions, but may become less reliable as climate change creates disaster patterns outside historical experience. So what does this mean for the future of these population centers? Will increased frequency and intensity of natural disasters eventually overcome the geographic advantages that have concentrated population within the circle? Or will human adaptability and technological innovation allow these dense population centers to maintain their resilience despite escalating environmental threats? The evidence suggests that while individual communities may relocate following catastrophic events, the broader population distribution patterns will likely persist with some internal adjustments. Rather than abandoning vulnerable regions entirely, populations tend to modify settlement patterns within those regions, building higher, constructing more robust infrastructure, or shifting slightly to less exposed locations while maintaining access to the same geographic advantages. This adaptive response creates a moving equilibrium where population concentrations shift incrementally in response to changing environmental conditions while maintaining the overall pattern of density within the circle. The economic momentum, established infrastructure, social networks, and cultural attachments found in these regions create powerful incentives to adapt in place rather than relocate entirely. Future trends. Will the circle hold? This adaptive equilibrium we've observed might soon face its greatest test. While populations have incrementally adjusted to environmental changes throughout history, an unprecedented transformation is underway that could fundamentally alter the habitability of the Asian population circle itself. The climate foundations that have supported billions of lives for millennia are beginning to shift in ways that may redraw humanity's geographic distribution. Northern latitudes are warming at approximately twice the rate of a global average, creating a remarkable geographic paradox. Regions like Siberia, historically too hostile for large-scale human habitation, are gradually becoming more temperate. As permafrost thaws across vast stretches of northern Asia, new land potentially suitable for agriculture and settlement is emerging where humans have never established significant population centers before. This northern warming presents both opportunity and crisis. The thawing permafrost could theoretically open new frontiers for human expansion, but this same process triggers a dangerous climate feedback loop. As frozen soils melt, they release additional greenhouse gases, accelerating warming further. Infrastructure built atop permanently frozen ground now faces collapse, as their foundation literally melts away. At the heart of our population circle, humanity stands at a crossroads. The Hindu Kush Himalayan glaciers, Asia's water towers, are melting at an alarming rate. These massive ice repositories feed the river systems that sustain hundreds of millions of lives throughout South and East Asia. Current projections indicate a temporary increase in water availability as glaciers melt more rapidly, potentially continuing until around 2050. But this apparent abundance masks a grim future. Once these glaciers substantially diminish, the water security that enabled civilization to flourish across this region will be permanently compromised. This transformation extends beyond water availability. Changes in temperature and precipitation are altering disease vectors across the region. Malaria and dengue fever, once confined to specific elevation ranges, are projected to become more prevalent across subtropical Asian regions as warming temperatures allow disease-carrying insects to expand their territory. Simultaneously, urbanization continues at an extraordinary pace. By 2026, over half of Asia's population will reside in cities, a fundamental reorganization of how people relate to their geography. Rural to urban migration, combined with reclassification of formerly rural areas, is creating unprecedented population densities. This urban transformation brings challenges with sprawl, congestion, infrastructure inadequacy, unemployment, and informal settlements. If not properly managed, these issues could potentially limit Asia's economic development. The fastest urban growth isn't occurring in established megacities, but in secondary urban centers across Indonesia, the Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam, creating new population nodes within the traditional circle. While urban centers densify, technological innovation offers countervailing possibilities. Precision agriculture represents one of the most promising developments. Using GPS guidance, Internet of Things sensors, and sophisticated data analytics, farmers can monitor crop health, soil conditions, and weather patterns in real time. These innovations allow for productive farming in previously marginal lands where traditional agricultural methods were economically unviable. This technological revolution stems from necessity. Growing labor shortages in developed agricultural regions, combined with the need to optimize water and fertilizer, are accelerating adoption. Precision farming tools could expand the geographic range where productive agriculture is possible, allowing populations to spread beyond the traditional fertile zones that have anchored the Asian population circle for millennia. However, climate projections for key agricultural regions present troubling scenarios. The North China Plain, one of the world's most productive agricultural areas, faces worsening heat stress in coming decades. The combination of high temperatures and humidity, exacerbated by widespread irrigation, creates conditions where agricultural laborers may physically be unable to work outdoors during peak summer periods by century's end. Under high-emission scenarios, these outdoor working conditions could exceed human physiological limits, making traditional farming practices impossible without significant technological intervention. These agricultural challenges will cascade through economic systems. Reduced productivity typically leads to rising food prices, with disproportionate impacts on low-income households. This economic pressure could intensify poverty and hunger in vulnerable regions, potentially triggering new migration patterns as people seek more livable conditions. The demographic implications are profound. While the traditional advantages of the Asian population circle are being undermined by climate change, the enormous momentum of existing settlement patterns creates powerful resistance to geographical redistribution. Cities represent massive investments in fixed infrastructure that cannot easily be relocated. Social networks, cultural identities, and economic systems all create strong attachments to place even as environmental conditions deteriorate. What emerges is a complex picture of potential population adjustment rather than wholesale migration. Communities will likely attempt adaptation in place before considering relocation. We can expect incremental shifts, perhaps accelerating movements already underway, such as rural to urban migration or coastal development, rather than entirely new settlement patterns emerging rapidly. This creates a scenario where populations may remain concentrated in areas facing worsening environmental conditions because the economic and social costs of large-scale migration appear prohibitively high. The infrastructure and social networks that make the Asian population circle function efficiently also create barriers to exit even as traditional geographic advantages erode. History suggests human populations do eventually respond to changing habitability patterns, albeit often with generational delays. We may see a slow redistribution as climate change alters the relative habitability of different regions. Northern expansion into previously frigid zones may accelerate, while areas facing extreme heat or water scarcity could see gradual population decline. Technology will play a mediating role in this process. Advances in water management, agriculture, and built environments can partially offset changing natural conditions. Cities can implement cooling strategies to combat rising temperatures. Agricultural innovations may maintain productivity despite changing conditions. But these technological solutions have limits and uneven distribution, potentially creating new inequalities in habitability. The future of the Asian population circle thus appears to be one of transformation rather than abandonment. The circle itself may persist, but with shifting internal patterns. Coastal megacities continuing to grow while some interior regions face challenges maintaining their historic populations. The northern edge may gradually expand as warming makes new territories habitable, while southern regions may struggle with heat extremes that test the limits of adaptation. So what does the future hold for this remarkable concentration of humanity? Experts believe the pattern we've examined will likely persist, though with notable shifts. Coastal megacities may grow even more significant as population centers within the Asian circle, continuing their historical advantages in trade and resources. However, climate change presents unprecedented challenges. Increasing heat extremes across Asia will test adaptation capabilities, particularly in densely populated coastal zones. Understanding these geographic forces illuminates how we might navigate our collective future. What lessons can we learn from these patterns to build resilience in the face of climate instability while meeting the needs of a growing population?